friends, whether you're joining us through the Sunday school or you just ran across us through the YouTube channel, we're glad that you're here. Today we're going to have a discussion about the Old Testament, and it's really one discussion among a series of discussions where we'll go throughout the entire Old Testament, but today just really some introductory remarks. My name is John Flug. I'm the pastor of First Presbyterian Church, and this is one of our ruling elders, James Spurgeon. And he's helped us to put together this Sunday school and this series on the Old Testament. So I guess we'll begin. And one of the things I want to begin with is really asking you this question, James. So many people, I think, often have this question, and I have often thought about it too, especially many years ago. Why is the Old Testament important? I mean, why is it necessary that we as Christians dive into these first two-thirds of the book of the Bible whenever Jesus comes in the last third? And Jesus, in some senses, seems like he replaces a lot of the first two-thirds. So why do we have that Old Testament? Why is it important for us to continue to go back to that?
You know, it's a pretty old book, isn't it?
It is.
It's a foreign book. It's a book written by foreign people in a foreign language in a culture that's thousands of years away from us. And so it's a good question. And the bottom line, I think, is that we are, as Christians, we're followers of Christ. We are the people of Jesus, and we're all about Jesus. And so, if we're going to be followers of Christ, to be a follower of Christ means to think and live and believe according to what he taught. And Jesus was all about the Old Testament. Jesus was a product of the Old Testament. It's the world into which he was born. It's the tradition he was brought up in. The Old Testament is alluded to constantly in the Gospels. And if we don't understand the Old Testament, we really don't understand the Gospels. It's the background. It's all of the information that makes sense of who Jesus was and what he did. And so without the Old Testament, we don't have everything there is to know or everything that has been revealed about Jesus.
Do you think would you say it goes even further, and this is kind of a curveball here, would you say that it goes even further than just knowing the history of the times that Jesus grew up in? Is it something more than that, or is that essentially what it amounts to, knowing the history that's led up to Jesus?
Everything in the Old Testament, properly understood, points to Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. He is the promised seed to Abraham. He is the one who comes and brings peace. I was reading something just last night written by a Jewish writer who's not a Christian, and talking about Messiah. And he said, when you think about Messiah, you think about peace. And of course we do also, because we understand that he is the Prince of Peace. But how do we know he's the Prince of Peace? Because Isaiah tells us in the Old Testament. And so what I was reading about Messiah said, so if you're thinking about beating your swords into plowshares, you may be having messianic thoughts. And it was just an interesting piece that I was reading. But Jesus is Messiah. Jesus is Jewish. Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament scriptures.
So let me ask you this. Do you think Jesus just fulfilled the Old Testament and kind of had a cursory understanding, or how well do you think Jesus actually knew the Old Testament?
I think he knew it better than anybody in his day. I think he grew up with the scriptures, things that I've read. Oxford scholar Alfred Edersheim, for example, 19th century. His opinion was that in first century Palestine, the people were a fairly literate people, and it is very possible that in some of the more devout homes that they even had copies of the scriptures in their homes. It's very possible that Jesus had the scriptures read to him and read them himself in his home when he was a child. And we also know that in those devout homes, the children, by the time they were bar mitzvahed, by the time they were 12, they knew the scripture so much better than probably most of our ordained ministers do today. Jesus, think about this. He's in the temple at age 12, and they're amazed both at the questions that he's asking and the things that he's saying about the scriptures. The rabbis in the temple.
So you're suggesting that it's not just learning the Bible, or in Jesus' case, the Old Testament, in the temple, or in his case, most of the time in the synagogues. It's at home. They've got scrolls. They're reading scriptures.
He was homeschooled in the sense that we think of as homeschooled. And his schooling would have been centered around the Torah and the writings, the scriptures.
Think Joseph taught him?
It's possible.
Okay.
I think a lot of it was probably from his mother, because I think that Joseph was probably in his carpenter shop, and so a lot of that fell to his mother. All of the Jewish, when you think of Galilee especially, when you think of in the times of Christ, Galilee is almost like the Bible Belt. What do people say about people in the South? They speak with an accent. The stereotype is that they're ignorant. They're Bible believers. They're more likely to be religious and believe in God than anybody else in the country. This is the same thing about Galilee in first century Palestine. And Jerusalem is New York City. And so when he goes to Jerusalem and he comes across these rabbis are very educated in a formal sense. And he has more of an informal education. But it was very, very important. They read the entire Old Testament on a regular basis out loud from the pulpit, as it were, in the synagogue. He heard it over and over and over again. Probably had more scripture memorized than most people in our churches today have even read.
So you point out that that this polarization between theologically liberal and theologically conservative existed even in Jesus' day. In our day, one of the things that you typically will define that is, how much weight do we give to Scripture, and how much weight do we give to man's interpretation of Scripture? It's this pull back and forth, and there's not really been the Christian church has not really definitively come down unanimously across the board by any means. Everybody kind of falls somewhere on that spectrum.
Right.
Where do you think Jesus fell down on that, as far as how he interpreted the Scripture, and does it matter to us today how Jesus himself interpreted the Old Testament?
I think it does matter. We confess as a church, for example, we say that we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, by which we mean one holy, universal, and church founded upon the apostolic teaching. So what we believe as Christians is tied to what the apostles gave us. Mm-hmm. The apostles were proxies for Christ. The apostles gave us the Gospels. And the Gospels were authoritative in the apostolic times. They were, if you want to know who Jesus was, here it is. For the first 20, 30, 40 years, there are oral traditions, there are stories that are being told. Finally, they're written down, and these become our Gospels. There's no way to know definitively anything about Jesus unless we believe the Gospels. And so when we go to the Gospels to find out who Jesus was and what did he teach, we find a Christ, a Jesus, who it's obvious he gives to the Scriptures, to the Old Testament, he attributes to them divine authority. They are authoritative.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, for example, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, until heaven and earth pass, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law until all is fulfilled.
That's interesting. That particular, the jot and the tittle, that's actually referred to the very letters in the text. He's speaking about Greek, but they're referring to the Hebrew, the yod, the smallest of the letters. Not just the words, right. The smallest of the Hebrew letters. So right. It's interesting that you bring that up.
Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. Now what is that? What is that? That's a phrase that signifies the Old Testament. Think not that I am come to destroy the Old Testament. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill it. He is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. That's what he claimed to be. And he gives, when in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, "You have heard that it has been said by them of old time, you shall not commit adultery. But I say unto you," and he is not correcting the Scripture. He's correcting the teaching on the Scripture. And he's using the Scripture itself to do that. And so his intent in the Sermon on the Mount is to reveal to them what the true intent of the Old Testament Scripture was in the first place.
So you're telling us that Jesus is not overturning the Old Testament, in fact.
No, he's fulfilling it. And, you know, it's interesting. Jesus, I lost my train of thought.
Okay, well, how about another question then? Let's see. We can maybe come back to some of this other stuff, but we're going into a new series here, a Sunday school series about the Old Testament. Do you want to tell us about how you plan to break out those books of the Old Testament? Or did you remember your train of thought?
Yes, I remember my train of thought.
Okay, we'll come back to that question.
People were amazed at the teaching of Jesus.
Okay.
Immediately after the Sermon on the Mount, they're amazed. And this is what they say. He teaches as one with authority and not as the scribes.
Right.
He taught as if he were the author of the book.
Right.
He just went in and they were just amazed at that. But I say unto you, it was as if he were the one who originally wrote the book, and now he were explaining it to them. And so that's interesting. You know, in John 10, he says the Scripture cannot be broken. Which strongly implies, or explicitly says, he believes in the authority of the Scriptures. What happened the first time that he ever went, that is recorded, that he went to the synagogue in his hometown after he had begun his ministry? He begins his ministry down south. He's baptized by the River Jordan. He's tempted in the wilderness. Then he gradually works his way north, and he's performing miracles and he's teaching. And so the rumor of him hits town before he gets there. And so when he comes into the synagogue, all eyes are upon him. And he sits down, which was the custom when they were going to, he stands up reading the Scripture, because they stood while they read the Scripture. And then when they were finished, they handed the scroll back, and then they sat down and taught.
They were preaching sitting down.
Yes. And so he's handed the Scripture from Isaiah, and he reads Isaiah chapter 60. And then he rolls it back up, and he hands it. And he says, "This day is the Scripture fulfilled in your ears." Wow. He just claimed to be the Messiah and the fulfillment of those Scriptures.
Yeah.
And it's clear over and over and over again. When he corrects people, he corrects them with the Scriptures. So he deemed the Scriptures to be very, very important. And the Old Testament was his Bible.
So if we're going to understand that Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament, then we never fully understand Jesus until we understand the Old Testament?
That's exactly right. Not only that, you think about the Apostle Paul. When the Apostle Paul went throughout the Roman world preaching, here's what he would do. He would find the synagogue. Mm-hmm. He would go into the synagogue, and he would open up the Old Testament Scriptures, and he would preach Jesus. Now that's amazing, because the New Testament had not been written. And so when they're referring to the Scriptures, they're referring to the Old Testament.
Right.
And he preached Christ from the Old Testament.
Okay. Well, the next question that I had for you was about in particular about the way we divide out the class here, and that is you're breaking out the books one at a time. But tell us about how the books of the Old Testament are in fact classified. How are they? Are they in chronological order? In other words, if I open in Genesis, can I read straight